Hello.
Hey, Pilot. How are you doing this wonderful Friday morning?
I'm doing really, really well. We're having scones for breakfast this morning.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I am. It's gonna be warm today in Wisconsin.
Nice.
I think I'm going to write some emails from my back porch, maybe for like. It's one of those things where I haven't done this year, but I do that. I go out there, sometimes with my iPad, just to like not. I'm terrified of breaking my work computer.
Yeah.
um, and I'll do that for like 5 minutes and be like, you know what, the sun makes this hard, but I have to try sometimes.
You got to get at least like 5 minutes of sunshine. That's all
It's
you need.
important. Yeah, it's important that I try, and then because what I'll find, I expect, even though I'm going to try anyway, is it's warm but not warm enough in Wisconsin yet to be outside in the shade and be comfy without like warm clothes on, because that's what you want. You want to be outside in the shade if you're gonna like look at a screen.
Yeah.
Anyway, um,
This is
weird.
this, this is not what this stream is about, but
This is we were literally just talking about before we hit the button of what are we talking about today, kind of getting on the same page and everything. And I always view we've done this a few times now, since we've been really regular with our streaming schedule of let's do this every Friday morning. Pretty much. I mean, we've had some exceptions, but only a couple.
and also
Um,
usually it's the exception is we're doing it a different time.
yeah, the exception is typically it's April Fools and let's run a game show.
Yeah.
That's like 50% of the exceptions so far.
Mhm.
And the other exceptions are we have a really incredible guest who happens to not be,
Yeah, or like
available at that
it's a
time.
conference. We're
Yes.
yeah. So,
So anyway, and we've done this a couple times now, um, since we've been regular with our schedule of hey, we just did a big thing, whether it was a flex course or like a workshop or a conference, and let's just kind of recap it. And a lot of times we will sometimes condense a little bit of what we talked about, but it's normally more reflective than anything.
mhm.
And also kind of a chance for us to sort of like add on things that are either tangential or maybe more, nerdy or well, all our stuff pretty
Out of
nerdy.
scope.
But you know what I mean, maybe more specific to something we're working on and less like general information about this tool or how you might want to use it. And and so I like these because they feel like a little bit of a chance to reflect, a chance to kind of like uh, maybe speak a little bit meta sometimes about how delivery method and things like that. But yeah, we're going to get into kind of all of those things in this particular one. I have no idea how long this is going to last. I almost never do
We
anyway
can
with
do
these
2
things.
hours. I think we can make it 2 hours.
Yeah, yeah. If you've tuned in, welcome to hour one of the
Yeah.
Reclaim TV reflection stream. We
If
should
this actually
do
goes 2 hours, I'm just gonna look like a fool.
if this goes 2 hours, I don't get to eat today.
Okay. So,
So, well, that's not true. It would be close to true. Fridays are weirdly busy for me in the afternoon. So, um, anyway, no, we'll be good. We'll be good. So what I wanted to do is just kind of chat. All right, first of all, if you're watching this and you didn't know, we just ran a flex course on Ghost, the open source CMS blogging tool, specifically really good for newsletter type stuff. Um, I highly recommend if you don't know what Ghost is, or you do and you're curious about how it works, that you check it out. If you go to reclaimed.tech, you can click on newsletters with Ghost in the menu, or if you're seeing this later on, it'll be in the past Flex courses menu. And you can check out all these blog posts, which will link you to all of the information, all of the videos, extra links, things like that. So we put out one of these for every week of the Flex course. And so each blog post will have, hey, here's a link to the videos, and then some additional resources and some kind of and some stuff you can check out to kind of follow along. So like in session two, um, which was really focused, I
that
should
was a
say
setup.
session. What did you say?
Session 2 is our building it kinda.
Yeah, in session one, I should take a step back. Session one was sort of introducing what Ghost is and what it's good for and what we like to use it for at Reclaim. Session 2 was all technical setup, like how do I install it? How do I point a domain at it? How do I get mail set up, email delivery set up with Mailgun, all of that kind of stuff. And then Session 3 went into how to use Ghost effectively and some things that you might want to check out. So we actually have a lot of links on this one of specific Ghost documentation that we mentioned and thought was helpful and interesting, and things like that. So check that out if you aren't aware. This is going to be available all the time, and basically our videos exist on YouTube as well as our PeerTube and this watch site, which tries to kind of organize them into like a nice playlist basically that we use. So you can always check these out. They will be available in the long term. If you have any questions about them or anything Ghost related, really, stop by the Discord or our forums. You can go to community.reclaimhosting.com to get links to those things, including our Discord and the forum, and basically everything else we do. So if you weren't aware, that's the spiel. We just did a thing. This is what we're all about here.
I just realized I don't have a banner for the community page. Who even am I? Hold on. Let's go.
There we go.
Mhm.
So yeah, and again, that's this page. So this is kind of, if you're curious about what we're doing here at Reclaim, go here. This is the place where everything else springs from. So you can go here and subscribe to our blog posts if you could click on the blog links and all kinds of stuff like that. So anyway, we just wrapped that up. Like I said, now's the time to reflect. I'm really happy with, I think specifically how we sliced up the sessions this time and kind of made them each an individual purpose, rather than being strictly linear in terms of content. And what I mean by that is, when we did our first Ghost Flex course, we did it similarly. And we did this one about a year and a half ago, but it was a little bit different. So we talked about what is Ghost, and then we right at the end installed it, I believe, in this session. And then in Session 2, we did a little bit more setup, and then and then got into the Ghost backend a little bit.
Yeah, but Session 2 was also a lot of, I guess, theory crafting. That's not quite right.
You're right. That I'm mixing up a little bit.
Yeah.
It was more about like, hey, we've got a Ghost install now, and how would we use it? And then also, how do you write a newsletter, basically?
Yeah.
And then the third one was like, okay, so we know how to make a newsletter. We know why we're using Ghost from Session 1, and we have it installed from Session 1. And Session 3 was sort of the Mailgun stuff and email setup. And that makes sense in terms of like pacing, of making sure that there's like technical stuff and also non-technical stuff in each session, and that's cool. We decided not to do it that way this time, and we really specifically were like, let's actually, this may sound weird, but let's actually kind of load all of the really technical stuff into one session. And so they're very much more purpose and why. Session 1 is the why. Session 2 is the how a little bit. And Session 3, I guess, is also kind of how, but it's more about how to use Ghost specifically. Session 2, we logged into Ghost to make sure it worked, and that was all we used of Ghost.
Yeah.
Everything in Session 2 was like DNS and configuration stuff. And the reason we did it that way was to try and isolate some of that stuff that people frequently have questions about or are nervous about. And we've been getting more questions about Ghost at Reclaim Hosting. So we wanted to be able to not only point them to our documentation, but if they wanted a video, we'd say, here's a very complete video about how to do almost everything. Of course, all using our tools. So if you have a different domain name that's registered somewhere else, like, we can help you with that too. But you may get in a good idea by watching someone do it front to back, everything.
If nothing else, it gives you a good sense of what sort of keywords to look for if you have a different provider.
Yeah, and ultimately, and what I mean by that is I'm talking about, we're using the cPanel DNS tool, and maybe your domain is registered someplace else and you're not using cPanel for the DNS part.
Mhm.
But a DNS editor, They kind of
DNS is
all do the
DNS.
same thing. Yeah, when you see someone do it in one tool, you can probably figure out how to do it in another. And if you can't, we can probably help you, right? So, anyway, we wanted to have a one-stop. This is all of the stuff that you may be nervous about kind of session.
Mhm.
And then this also allowed us to have, as a really great benefit to that, a one-stop, here's how you use Ghost type session, and a one-stop, here's why you'd use Ghost session. So I can't say that this was objectively better, but I feel like it was a better move, and I'm really happy with that. And I'm interested to see, maybe we can apply this to future Flux courses too, and if that holds true, you know.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that we're maybe more. This is a structure we're maybe more equipped to do now because um, when we made the first Flex course, that would have been November of that year, and I think people had had individual experience with Ghost prior to that year, and we started doing the roundup in January. So January 2022. So we'd had about 10 months of using Ghost once a month,
Yes.
which is not nothing, but we have now done it for two and a half ish almost years.
Well, and also the roundup was kind of a guinea pig in terms of our technical platforms for
Yeah.
Ghost. So the roundup originally,
Roundup inspired a lot of the stuff that you did to make
the Ghost installer better. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my Ghost installer technically, I can't remember if it came out after the roundup, because we ended up moving the migrate. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
No, it had
we ended
to,
up
because you put
migrating the roundup into it, basically.
Yeah. Also, I think, didn't you do that this past December?
Kind of. Yeah. So my Ghost installer now is on kind of several revisions,
Okay.
in terms of tools and things like that. But I actually was looking at this recently. I believe the earliest version of my Ghost installer was actually in 2023. 1 year
You got to
ago.
mouse over it, I think.
Oh, I didn't know you can do that. 2022, August of 2022.
Yeah.
So yeah, it came out several months after we were already using the roundup. And so I'm pretty sure the roundup actually has been migrated technically,
Yeah.
into a few different Ghost installs. I think originally it was the old one that was kind of out of date, and then I migrated it into like, oh, I think I could do this in Docker and it would be easier, and then I made the installer, and anyway. So the roundup has been a continuous testing thing for us in certain ways. But we didn't have a lot of experience with that, and I've made a certain amount of changes to the installer to make it more seamless and easier to use.
And what that means for the structure of this is we've gotten a lot more experience in terms of making Ghost easy to use and to set up. So that means that we can have our own contained setup session of, here's all the steps you need to do. We've been trying to make it as streamlined as possible. Ghost has added a lot more features to, well, I mean, it already had a bunch of the features that we showed off in session 3, but it's added a lot more features to the UI.
It's been fast development there, and straight improvements, and again, like, which is surprising for me to see, because I used Ghost as my blog CMS for like 4 years or so, and honestly, over that time period, it barely changed at all, and I was kind of like, there's a lot of missing features here that I really wish existed, and I moved away from it because it felt like, well, it doesn't have a lot of functionality that something like WordPress does, but also it's sort of more of a pain at that time to take care of than something like what I use now for my blog, which is a static site generator. So I was like, I feel like I'm getting worse to both worlds, so I moved away from it.
Yeah.
And in the last couple years, it is just rocketing. And then from my perspective, me taking the time to write an installer means I understand pretty well how to use Ghost now. So I'm not really, it's not, we don't do a lot of ongoing maintenance to our roundup. We click the update button on it every once in a while, and
it's kind of it.
So
this is also, now I'm thinking about, you're saying you spend so much time working on the installer, you working on Ghost. I'm thinking about how we structured it last time. we came up with we do this sometimes. We sort of round robin it and we say, well, this person will host and this person will act as a guest. And if you've watched our flex courses, other flex courses, we did that for I think we did that for the Discord flex course, and we did that for the Installatron apps flex course, and we've done that for a couple. And it's nice to sort of say, okay, one person on the team is going to sort of take point and host for a given definition of host. We're all hosting, but host, and then the other person will be sort of the guest and play that role of like, okay, I'm learning from you and with the audience.
From and with, yeah, I think
from
that
and
makes
with
a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's a really good format, and we sort of did that this time around. Like, I didn't know really very much about the mail DNS setup, so you were hosting for me, and then vice versa. I outlined and I came up with the structure of session 3, but that was sort of we sort of tag teamed that.
I mean,
but
you very much led that one and planned it. I showed up to it, right? That's kind of some of how that works for us as a team. Is we say like we want one person who like owns this session, knows what needs to be covered, it makes an outline, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And in session 1 was maybe a little bit like, so like Amanda was that for session 1,
Mhm.
but honestly, like we all had lots to say about
Yeah.
that. So while there was an outline there, it would maybe be a little bit harder to tell who was driving, I guess.
Yeah. But what I'm thinking of is now the idea that for us, for our original one, we were doing that, but there was less of a sense of there was a sense of like, I was saying, okay, I spend a lot of time in the post editor because I compile the roundup every month and I do the writing. And because I do the compilation, I also think about, okay, how do we structure this? Why are we doing it like this? What do you want your newsletter to be? So my session's going to be a little bit of how to use the UI because I do that, but then I'm also going to, talk about, how and why you would run the newsletter and use Ghost. And so that's sort of this meandering topic of these are the things that I know. So those are the things that I'm going to cover. And if there's redundancy or if there's a section that would go nicely with what you're talking about, that doesn't matter because it's going to be in my session because that's what I'm talking about. Whereas we've now had enough experience and there's sort of enough cross-pollination in terms of what we know that we can say, oh, no, okay, no, this is the topic for the session. And Pilot's in charge of that topic, but it's not, this is the session that Pilot runs, so this will be the topics that Pilot knows. This is the topic. Pilot.
Yeah, we're all a little bit more familiar with Ghost to be a little bit more general on some of that stuff, or at least say like, hey, there's this, but I don't know much about it. Taylor, do you know?
Yeah.
That's a good point. I forgot that in when we did our first one, I would have basically known very little about the actual Ghost backend, except from what I knew from way back when I used to run my blog on it. So I was kind of like, I think this is a thing, but I actually haven't logged in. Well, now we all especially because at that time in particular, you
it's mostly just me.
A one-person show on the roundup, basically. I mean, you and Jim a little bit too, but now we have much more. Well, I wouldn't say even. You still do most of it, but I contribute part of the roundup now, and other folks on the team do too. It's not.
I would give you guys more credit.
It's not quite.
I also write. I write one section.
Oh, okay. But anyway. You project manage the roundup too, which is a whole thing. And then get the thing out the door, finishing it, which is also a whole thing. My point is though, at that time, I would have been kind of like, yeah, I kind of know what Ghost is about, but I actually don't really use it that much right now. So even though I wrote an installer, as we talk about, I think sometimes, these are all their own little worlds unto themselves. Like just because I wrote a thing that downloads a couple files and runs a few command line commands doesn't mean I know intimately how to use the thing. And so since then I've gotten more comfortable with Ghost actually. So that was a change. And you have gotten more comfortable with the back end and technical stuff of Ghost too.
That's very kind of you. I appreciate that. I don't know if it's true, but I appreciate it. Also, thank you, Eric. That's really nice. We have a comment in the chat of just I thought the first pass on the live streams was good. Second pass has been the best tutorial
Oh,
anywhere.
that's really
That's
nice.
really
Yeah.
kind. Thank you.
I really, that means a lot, I think to all of us. And yeah, I'm really curious, we're not always going to be doing revisiting flex courses. This particular one at this particular time made a ton of sense because we were
Mhm.
getting more questions about Ghost. There was all this stuff in the news about Substack, being crumbling and hitting major content moderation issues, um, and all this stuff. And we're like, yeah, it's time to revisit that. And I was really pleased with how it, at least from us, and I hope from folks that watch it, um, agree, it felt valuable. It didn't feel like we're doing this just because. And to be clear, it wasn't like a lot less work. Like it was still basically the same amount of work from our perspective. It was a little bit easier to plan some of it because we kind of knew what things to cover, and I already had sort of an internal list of these are things I'd want to do a little bit differently. But I do think we're going to revisit, here and there in the future. One I'd love to do that I felt really good about at the time, but I would like to see how much better I can make it is the understanding containers flex course, which was so like technical and Docker and command line stuff. But I felt like, and I still feel like, there's not a lot serving the niche of folks in our community around that stuff, which is okay. I understand, a lot of these people understand at a basic level what containers are and why they are kind of interesting, but not like how they can easily do something with eh, that isn't for people that I'm developing my own application. And so I want to push on that more, and I really liked how that was, obviously we're doing everything in Reclaim Cloud, and that's what we're going to do, right? That's our platform. That's where I can instruct you. But I think everything we did there was very applicable in a general sense. And a lot of that applies here for this Flex course. That's really important to me that we have kind of you know, we're always having something that we can help people do stuff with the tools we offer at Reclaim, but it isn't, we're not selling you certifications to things that are only useful on our platforms. Like we're not Cisco.
Yeah.
um, and then we're not selling anything with these, but anyway, so um,
That's actually, now that you're saying that, another thing from the chat is the idea of the timing on this was really good. We actually had revisit the Ghost Flex course on our. We have a little list in Asana with a bunch of different ideas for streams and for Flex course and things like that. And one of them was revisiting the Ghost Flex course. We actually had something else planned for this slot, and we ended up moving it because it didn't make sense with a bunch of the other work that we had scheduled right now. And we thought, Ghost, we know Ghost. We know a lot about Ghost. We're going to do second pass at Ghost will be refining what we've already done. The timing turned out to work really, really well. And now I'm thinking, okay, you're talking about revisiting the Containers Flex course. I just wasn't able to be a part of that one, not even to follow along, just because of how the timing worked out on my end last time we ran it.
It was also like the second Flex course ever. Right?
Yeah.
So the
That's
first
true.
one was the amazing one that Tom Woodward did with Gravity Forms, Form of Awesome, and that was super cool. But we were very much figuring out what a Flex course was, and that was still the case in understanding containers. I'll also say that understanding containers, I spent a lot of time preparing that one, like months, and not.
I remember
anything
that
I
was
did all
a
day for
lot.
months, but it was a lot because most of that stuff that we talked about, I didn't know before the planning process. I vaguely knew, but wasn't confident enough to be able to demonstrate and say this is what this means and all that stuff. It was a ton of work.
Mhm.
From like a lesson planning. I wrote lesson plans, like detailed lesson plans for all of that stuff, and did a lot of testing to make sure I understood it very thoroughly. We did fancy things with video production because we didn't use StreamYard for that one. That was all using OBS and OBS Ninja, and we did like green screening. And like, don't get me wrong, I love that stuff and would kind of actually like to return to some of the more like interesting when it makes sense. The nice thing about StreamYard though is it lets us really focus on what we're doing, you know, and make sure that that works well and is good and is clear and readable and all of these things. So that's where I think that one would be an interesting opportunity, because I have done a lot of the work. Would know some things I would do differently, and it won't take me uh, 5 months of skill building to do some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
And
so
it's
that's something that, and we do have that planned. That's in our idea list. I don't know when that one will come, but I would actually imagine probably this year or early next year. So,
yeah. I don't
but yeah.
yeah, I don't want to
Anyway,
promise anything.
no, we're not going to, because we're still very much figuring out what we're doing this summer and everything like that too. So anyway, but that's my point was, I felt this was a valuable thing to revisit. I think the idea of revisiting some of these flex courses is something we're going to continue doing, not for everyone, but for some of them, and I'm excited about that, because it really felt like I got to hone we got to hone as a team our message and how we communicated and all that stuff. So it was really good. I liked it. So some other things I wanted to kind of chat about in terms of timeliness. I thought it was really interesting, actually, that we said, like, hey, we did this for a reason at this time, but also like a ton of really interesting news came out about Ghost during this time too. Again, all related. I think Ghost has a lot of energy behind it right now because of so many people moving their newsletters to it for a lot of good reasons.
And
Um,
coincidentally, I think that a lot of this news happened after we announced the Flex course, because we try and
oh,
announce these
well
things
after, yeah.
3 months in advance ish.
This activity pub thing happened
Like,
only a couple weeks ago.
yeah.
So during the Flex course, and basically we started hearing news about the idea of Ghost supporting Activity Pub, and I'll talk about Activity Pub in a second. I think in the first or second week of the Flex course, of there's like, hey, there are rumors, and it was basically like one of the heads at Ghost was like, Mastodon being like, what if Ghost did Activity Pub? And people were like, what? um, and then they made a formal announcement. So basically, Ghost has announced support for Activity Pub. And what that is Activity Pub is the protocol that the Fediverse is built on. And what the Fediverse is, is interoperable social networking. So it is, Mastodon is the most popular thing that is solely built on top of Activity Pub. But there are other things. But basically, the idea of the Fediverse, if you're completely unfamiliar, it's just that, hey, you can have a social network that talks to other social networks, essentially. Or you can have a social network that is distributed across multiple services, like email, right? Everyone has an email address. You don't have to have an email address with the same company to talk to other people. You can have an email address that's Gmail and hosted by Google. You can have an email address that's Proton Mail and hosted by Proton. I'm actually not sure what the name of the company behind Proton Mail and Proton VPN and all that stuff is. Proton.
Ish.
Yeah.
It's something. It's got to be
I
something
could
like that.
certainly Google this and find out in a few seconds. Let me just whoops. Let me look at the. Yeah, it's just Proton, I believe. So anyway, but those are different companies, different email services, but you can email each other. That's the same thing. That's what the Fediverse is. You can have someone with a Mastodon server that is like us, a small one like social.ds106.us. It's managed by a couple of people from the internet or whatever. Or
We
you
actually
can
have two. We also have reclaim.rocks.
Yes. And well, that one's not for public sign up, but yes.
No, that's true. That's so that we can have the fun
the
username.
domain name on ours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can go to mastodon.social and have an account there, and they work together. It's okay. And you can move between them even. That's what the Fediverse is. Fundamentally, it's social networking that isn't tied to one company. That's what I'm just going to simplify it down to. Activity Pub is a protocol that makes it happen, and it is a standard that the W3C ratified, I think is the right word for it, adopted, whatever. And it is interesting because it is a little bit more flexible standard than you might think of. So like Mastodon is, especially if you're only familiar with Mastodon, Mastodon is basically like what Twitter, is or was or whatever, X. But
Something.
ActivityPub is more flexible than that. It can do things that look like Instagram. It can do things that look like a lot of things, basically.
I don't really understand ActivityPub, and I think that's
it's
probably
just messaging back and forth. It's just,
okay.
hey, I'm going to talk to you and let you know that this thing happened, and the other server goes, sick.
I'll dress it up to make it look like this.
Yeah, and so it's just messaging, but
Okay.
the standard is how those messages should look and be formatted.
Okay.
So fundamentally, it's kind of like an API, right? But it's an API that, because that's what an API is too. Is it's just text that's formatted in a way we've agreed upon, basically. And the ActivityPub is a more specific version of that. So we've agreed, oh well, all of the messaging for two social networks, we at least need to know who this is from. So we need like some kind of username or something. We need some kind of URL, and we need some kind of content. Like that's like the minimum, and then people can build on top of that. So anyway,
Ghost is going to be
that standard.
Yeah, and Ghost is going to living it back
to going to adopt it. And you might go, if you, including me, you might go, well, what does that mean? Right? Like, what does that mean? Ghost is a blogging platform. That doesn't look like what Mastodon looks like. So what would that mean? And honestly, some of that is to be seen, because when a totally different type of platform adopts ActivityPub, what it can actually do and what it actually looks like can look different. So as an example here, WordPress has an ActivityPub plugin that's really well maintained, has been out for a while. I believe Jim has it on his blog. Yes. I'm not even following it though. Anyway, I already follow his website on RSS, so I don't really need it here, but whatever. So maybe this isn't a great example. I'm pretty sure Ed Beck also has
If
it.
you do, it might be older poster.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do this one though.
So anyway, and you'll see a second here. So you can see that what this means is you can see username at edbeck.com. That's Ed's WordPress site. Sorry, Ed, for using an example without even mentioning, but whatever. I'm sure he probably doesn't mind. So otherwise, you wouldn't put this out here. So anyway, this looks a lot like a Mastodon profile, but you can see that Ed also has a normal Mastodon profile. And what if I click on this here, it's going to say, oh, you actually need to look at the original profile. I'm not really 100% sure why it's the case right now, but when I click on this, it's just going to go to the author page for his WordPress site. And the same thing will work for Baba Tuesdays, I believe. I didn't test
it should, I think.
Time.
We don't test things ahead of time. Testing things ahead of time is for Flex courses. Yeah. That's what we do.
This is off the cuff. Anyway, my point is this looks different, right, than what a lot of other Mastodon profiles look like. So if I just go to Jim's normal profile, I've got like posts in line here, and there's no it's a little bit different because it's local on the server. Here's another example. We have our PeerTube is available via ActivityPub, and if I go on here, you'll see that every post gets its own little, every video gets its own little post in the timeline, and it basically just has the title and the link, and then it throws some of the like these are basically the like tags that are on our server. I think it's gonna throw them on most videos.
Yeah, I think so.
That's not the case, actually. I'm not 100% sure when it does that. That might be a new feature or something. But anyway, my point is we actually don't like manually post this. It's not like we go to our PeerTube and post it. It just does that if you follow it. So my point is ActivityPub, while it's a standard, how software chooses to use it, and it does affect the experience of it.
If you want to get even, if you want to get meta with it, not just PeerTube, but oh my god, I've totally forgotten. Owncast is also federated, and so Taylor, if you go back to you can do the follow, but also if you go back to Mastodon, you can look at for Reclaim.tv live at Reclaim.tv, and if you scroll down, it's us. Hello.
Yeah. And Owncast support for ActivityPub, I find amazing, actually, in particular. So, again, we use a few different tools for our video stuff here. We stream out using a thing called StreamYard, which is basically our video production tool for these. Of course, our videos do go to YouTube. And we live stream to Reclaim.tv, which is Owncast powered. And then all of the videos, all of the past streams and videos get archived at our PeerTube, which is archived at Reclaim TV. PeerTube and Owncast are both Fediverse tools. You don't have to understand all this. It's honestly kind of confusing. And so the way we explain this to people is just go to Reclaim.tv and you'll see all the stuff. Basically, that's what we've tried to do. But one thing I love about Owncast, and one reason why we're using it, is it has this excellent Fediverse integration that kind of explains itself a little bit better. So you can click this follow button, and if you don't know, you might be like, follow what? Like what? And it says, by following the stream, you'll get notified in the Fediverse when it goes live. Now's a great time to learn about the Fediverse if it's new to you. I love that they have this here. And I know it's linking to documentation that people would have to read, but like, it's a nice touch, honestly. And it'll say like, hey, what is this? How do I get an account? What does this mean? And so in here, you can just put in whatever your Fediverse username is, right? So I'm Taylor Jaden at social.ds106.us, and I can hit follow. And it's going to take me to my place where I can follow them. In this case, it's going to take it to Mastodon. Anyway, I love the way Owncast has implemented this. And this is my main point, is that the way these features are discoverable and how they show up in other clients, it matters a lot, I think. I love that Owncast has the link here, but also decides to generate a GIF at the moment to make it's just a nice thing. So
yeah.
So, for instance, for WordPress, it's kind of, as far as I know, it's more of a publishing integration where ActivityPub support there. People can follow you, but you can't really do too much in response to that, basically. And it is interesting to see what Ghost is going to do. They have a little bit different idea of how this works. They've already got this idea of an inbox and notifications. And the idea is that it's a little bit more two-way. So you can follow people from your Ghost blog and get that into your Ghost blog, which is really interesting. And I think really innovative if it works well, because this could actually be the first tool of its kind, which is, I think, hey, this is your home on the internet. It's your main website. It's your blog or your newsletter or your business's newsletter or whatever. And people can follow you there in a myriad of ways. Email, RSS, ActivityPub, great. But also, you can follow them and two-way interact with them all from that tool. Now, if this is good, it'll be really interesting to see, because I could see me moving from Mastodon to this, not using this in concert with. Like, this could be my thing, right? But maybe I would still want to separate it. I don't know. But I'm at a place where I want to find out, basically. I'm very interested to see how this actually plays out. None of this is available yet. It's something they're working on, and they say they'll have testing this year. And so who knows? It could be available the end of the year or next year. We don't really know. But I love this page, this ActivityPub page, and you just linked it, so thank you, Pilot. And I'm very interested to see what they're doing, especially as a nonprofit in the space. Ghost, the development of Ghost is headed by a nonprofit company. So I'm curious to see what that means in this whole thing. There is also they're apparently working with some members of the Mastodon team. I don't know what that means, but that's interesting too. So I am very curious to see that. And so I'm also really interested to see, and I mentioned this already in the last session, but that they have this like recommendations thing, and we were talking about this, and it's basically a blog roll. It's just, hey, these are sites I like, basically, and you can list them. But it actually uses WebMention, which is an IndieWeb standard that is really cool, that they've adopted that, I think, too. And so I'm really liking what I'm seeing with Ghost right now, which is it's this mixture of simplicity with features I really think are interesting. Um, that is I'm finding attractive, and I think I want to move my blog to it. I already had a stream a few months ago where I was like, I'm moving my blog to WordPress, and maybe I still end up doing that. But I think right now I'm so invested in what this ActivityPub thing might look like, and I really want to try it, and I want to be there when it's out. So I would need to move beforehand. That I want to really move to Ghost, and it's funny because the last move I made was from Ghost. My blog has been at one point a WordPress site, and then another point a Jekyll site that was hosted on GitHub pages, and then I moved it to Ghost, and then I moved it to Hugo, and it's been there for years now, and now I'm probably moving it back to Ghost.
Sometimes you just need to change up what you're using just to make it a little fresh.
I mean, this is my hobby in some ways, right? It's also my job. So it doesn't upset me. Like I will learn some valuable skills in that process. This time I really want to learn how I can move things automatically so that maybe other people can too. Or maybe that's a solved problem. I don't actually even know. But I actually don't think so. I don't think Ghost has a way to pull from like my Hugo site directly right now, but I will find out. And
I
yeah,
would
I'm
be
really
surprised because
interested.
I think they were focusing primarily on how to get people out of Substack and WordPress.
They have like they have a few importers. The thing is like they're not going to have an importer for Hugo. That's a small enough thing that they won't have that. But what my blog posts are is they're all markdown. So worst case, I can probably copy and paste the markdown into Ghost and it will look kind of okay if I can also get the images in there. But what I'd really want is to say, can I give you my RSS feed and you just suck all the posts in? That would be
I'm imagining the most insane hack, which would be, and there's no reason that this would exist at all, but which would be to have set up a WordPress site, go find a plugin that will pull in all your markdown, run the import from Hugo to WordPress, make sure everything looks nice, and then immediately turn around and run the WordPress import into Ghost. Which is a ridiculous pipeline.
Idea, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. I mean that could work. I will say I've already done enough like can I get my posts in to WordPress thing to say that I know it would be a little bit tricky, but doable. I found success using Feed WordPress actually, which technically pulls in a copy of the posts. So that could be a solution, honestly. I think though, given Ghost has really good markdown support, like
that's
really,
true.
Its editor used to be markdown only. When I first started using Ghost, there wasn't a visual editor; it was just markdown file, and it had a decent preview. But anyway, it wasn't even a live preview. I think you had to like hit a button and it would render the markdown as a page. But anyway. But even now, their markdown block is first class, and by that I mean it does all of the things. It's not like
checkboxes.
Jetpack has a. Sorry, what did you say?
Does it do checkboxes?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, because that's my standard. Discord does not support checkboxes.
Throw Discord in the trash.
This is
throw it out. One of the things so one of the things that is a given, I love footnotes. I've talked about this and like I like writing my blog with footnotes, and it does markdown footnotes. In fact, in Ghost, weirdly, the only way to do footnotes is to use markdown, but you don't have to write your whole post in markdown. You can just make a footnote in a little markdown block and it will work seamlessly. Anyway, so that would be one way, but again, I'd have to figure out how to move my images over. They may have to live in their own little folder or something, because the images will be coded into Markdown at like Jaden.me/whatever folder
they gotta live
in, and Ghost won't have that in its media library. But I may be able to kind of hack that. Like I could host them under the Ghost folder in like a old images folder or something like that and rewrite the URLs. That would be one way of doing it. Anyway, but I would love to see if there's a better solution. Hell, maybe someone's written a Hugo to WordPress XML thing, and that could just give Ghost that WordPress XML and not actually round trip it through WordPress. I don't know. There's a lot of solutions I'll have to look at. But the thing I'm actually more worried about, because worst case scenario, I will copy and paste Markdown. I don't have that many blog posts. It's okay, you know. I'm actually most curious about themes. One of the things that I really liked about Ghost when I last used it was that its theming engine was somewhat simple, and there were a lot of really good open source, completely free to use themes. The downside and upside of Ghost themes is that they are they're much more what you see is what you get. So but they're also way less flexible. So in a WordPress theme, you can find themes like Astra that are pretty good and do like anything you want and can look like a
Yeah.
lot of different things and all this stuff and have this
The
customizability.
trade-off for Astra is that you know how many times I've seen Astra pop up in an error log because it's not playing well with something else.
Yeah, I mean, but is that Astra's fault or is that because it's so popular and you're seeing other things break? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
hard to say sometimes.
yeah,
But
that's true.
that's just one example, right? There's lots of really great WordPress themes
Mhm.
that can look like a lot of things. Ocean WP, the block editor or the full site editor themes.
I
Those
remember
can
trying
look
to
like a lot of
rebuild
things.
someone's Ocean WP site and just going, "How did you do this? How did you there's too many options here. How do I rebuild this? You clearly spent so much time on this."
Yeah, Ghost blogs aren't like that.
Nope.
Themes, they kind of just look the way they look. There is no like configurator type thing in Ghost. There you can change some basic
We did the
colors
color
usually.
swapping, yeah, but
Yeah,
there's
but
not like a
that's
rearranging of
not
stuff.
not really. But the cool thing is that actually makes it in some ways, if you are the type of person who, like me, you want to have a good looking theme that you can edit by digging into it, the code, I mean, it's actually way simpler uh, because it, I'll show in a way, and it also means that there's a lot less like upselling going on. Most Ghost themes are either free or paid, and there's really no between, which I kind of hate.
Yeah.
Um, so these are paid themes. I'm on a paid theme page. I just realized. But if I go to the official ones, these are all
There we go.
the official made by Ghost team or the open source project themes. There are a lot of themes out there, but my point is it's kind of a straightforward thing. It's like, okay, you want this theme, it's paid, you pay for it,
Kind of
great.
love XOXO.
Yeah, isn't
It's
that
like
great?
is that like $90?
Yeah, it's like $90, but
Really
you know,
channeling Memphis design though. I kind of love it.
so what I'm curious about though is in my experience with Ghost themes, they don't need much over time.
No.
There are new features that come out with Ghost, and then the theme would need to support them. But Ghost themes are so simple that you can also learn how to support them somewhat simply. You don't need to write
Mhm.
code to hack in support for whatever feature. You are simply putting that HTML element on the page in a lot of cases. So, um, an example here, they have this starter theme, which is designed for you to start a theme from. And it actually does a really great job on their GitHub of explaining like these are the main files. We've alluded to this, but never really looked at it too much. But Ghost themes are essentially templated HTML files. So they use this HBS, which stands for handlebars, which is like a templating language, basically. But if you open one of these here, if I go to like, well, I guess I'll go to index. There's probably, I'm not sure what we'll actually see here. This is not a super great example for reasons we'll talk about in a second. Let's go to a page.
Yep.
So um, basically, anything in these curly braces is the templating language. So what this says is, all right, cool. So what we're going to do is define the post area here. But you'll notice everything else is just HTML, basically. So you can go in here and say, I see article and it's got a class and it's the article is GH article. Okay. Ghost article, I think. And then it looks like it's going to insert another class here. Okay. And there's some like rules here. But my point is, if you wanted to say for some reason, make all of your headers not an H1 but an H2, you would just change that from a 1 to a 2, right? You
That's really
shouldn't do that, by the way. That
nice.
would be a bad
No.
accessibility idea. But you get my point. Or let's say at the bottom of every single post, you wanted a little GIF that you always like. You would
Always the
literally,
same GIF.
yeah, I'm gonna have to fork this, aren't I? Yes, I don't want to do that. Hold on, hold on. Please hold
Why
on.
don't we just like live just narrate the code?
I got a solution.
That's
Don't worry.
good. That's good video, isn't it?
Yeah. So
There you
this
go.
isn't going to be highlighted very well, but that's fine.
That's
So
fine.
if I wanted to go at the bottom of my content here, right? Div class content, at the bottom of every single post in the content area, I want a GIF. All right, well, just like put your image tag in there and close it up, right? So like you would literally just write your thing, or you want to link to something else. Uni.reclaimhosting.com. Check out the community page. So my point being, that's what you would do. You would just add the HTML you want and save the file. Now you go, that's not that simple. It kind of is when you're talking about editing a theme and fundamentally what it is. So the way that WordPress, you would do this in WordPress, is you would make a child theme. So you would take a theme that you like and you would make a child theme. And it's not that hard to do, really. You have to, there's a little bit of boilerplate that you basically make a file that says, this is a child theme of this other theme. Please use that other theme for everything else.
If I don't tell you to change something, use that instead.
Yeah. And then you make, basically you take a file and you make a copy of it and you change it. And what that does is WordPress says, I see the same file in the child theme. I'm going to use the child theme version of it. That's like I'm probably missing a lot. That's how I use child themes anyway. And it's not that hard to do, but it is a little bit trickier because it can be a little harder, at least in my experience, to parse out where you would make those changes because of the way that WordPress themes are structured. You're looking at PHP code and seeing this PHP code generates this type of thing or this type of page template. If you are like me and more familiar with just looking at HTML and like looking at the cool thing about this is you can look at like a cool site you like birchtree.me is a blog I follow that I know is on Ghost. And I can be like, how did he make this like tilting little thing, you know? And I can just inspect it and just like,
Gonna have to zoom that one in if you want anyone to see it.
we're not going to actually care too much about what the code is, but my point is like I can look at that element and copy the HTML from my from my inspector and look at it and try to figure out how it works. And that is a relatively discoverable way for me to do that because the web HTML is open. You can just look at the HTML that gets sent to your browser. And the flip side of that is in Ghost, I can write that HTML into my theme directly. So it's less steps, basically, for me to figure that out. And I find it easier. That is also what led me to using Hugo, because it's very similar in that way. For perspective here, it's kind of the same thing. It's like a child theme. So like if you go into my whole site right now is open source, which I kind of love, including like the posts. But anyway, if you go into my GitHub for my blog, if you go to themes, the theme I'm using is called Papermod, and it's actually linked in as like a Git repo in there, and I could go to it. And basically, themes in Hugo have this like layouts folder, and these are all the same types of templates, basically, that were kind of like what we saw in Ghost. And all I need to do is make the same file in my layouts folder to change it. And so that's fundamentally kind of like a child theme. The difference is in WordPress, the child themes and child themes need to be using PHP, and I have to write that. And PHP is not unfigured outable, but it takes me longer to do simple things in for this type of customization.
In my
And
experience, HTML is also just like, in the same way PHP is not like unlearnable. HTML, I feel like there's just a lot of resources for learning HTML, and they're pretty good. And also, if you don't like them, there's going to be more. And there's
well, and
presumably
what
the same
I'm
thing for PHP.
fundamentally changing
Yeah,
here is not a program. It
yeah,
is markup. So it is unlikely to break in a catastrophic way. It may not look the way I like, right? Or it may not display information perfectly, but that
you're not going
is
to damage
not the same thing as
functionality or anything.
debugging a program,
Yeah,
you know? So anyway, I want to marry those two things, right? I want the child theme like uh, thing of WordPress in a CMS that is dynamic and can offer dynamic features like ActivityPub and email support. But I want to be able to edit my theme the way I did on my static site, and that's kind of what Ghost is, and that's why I think I'm going to move to it. I'm not sure what I'm going to do because I don't really want to pay for a Ghost theme, honestly. But I did find a Ghost theme that is very similar in layout to my current blog. That's like enough money that I'm hesitating about it. But I'm also like, this may be interesting to see what using a paid Ghost theme is like. Like, is this something I have to pay every year? What is this like? You know?
one-time purchase type thing.
Yeah, I don't know really. So, but I could easily take this
Mm-hmm.
and get to way my blog currently looks. I don't need to look exactly the same to be clear, but I think it would be an interesting
Yeah,
experiment to see how if I can make it somewhat similar. I'm sure I could do things like change the colors, like this dark theme is too dark for me. I don't actually like that it's trying to look like iMessage clearly, but it is kind of like my current blog layout. So anyway, I don't know. I also could start from scratch using their starter theme, but I'm not super interested in doing that, to be honest with you. I'd rather take a theme that I mostly like and just adjust it. That would be more likely to be what I would do. And it's what I did on my original site. I think I've mentioned this before, but this little terminal thing, this little about me thing, I actually wrote for my Ghost blog and put in place of the header of it, basically. And then I ended up doing the same thing on my Hugo site. So I
it's
don't
kind
know.
of the
I
best way
think
to
I'm gonna
learn, you know.
yeah, and but it's very learnable. And one thing I would probably do this time is I'd probably and this is probably why I won't use a paid theme is I'll probably take an official theme and fork it and work on my changes in the fork because that'll also be a good experience for me to learn how to like merge updates in from a fork. That's not something I've done a lot with in GitHub. I'm somewhat familiar with Git for my own purposes and from our company perspective, but I don't know a lot about how to like take my own version of something, incorporate their updates with my changes. I've only very rarely done that. So, as like anything, I have to come up with three other little reasons to do it. And usually they're involved in learning something new. So, I'm probably going to move my site to Ghost for
You've
that
talked
reason.
yourself around in the last
Couple
40
weeks,
minutes. Yeah.
honestly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 40 minutes really. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to explore customizing Ghost themes in different ways. I'm really excited to see what their ActivityPub support looks like. I'm really interested in seeing what I could do about comments. Right now all my comments are in Disqus and I would love to move those over but actually stop using Disqus for new posts on my site.
I just
Um,
realized that that was a pun on discuss.
Yeah.
So, okay.
It's like I want to use Ghost native commenting feature for new posts. And I also want to incorporate web mention support, which is an IndieWeb thing, into posts, which that I could do. That's actually pretty doable. There's ways to do that, but yeah, I'm really excited. So
You're talking me into it
that was
now also.
supposed to be a short stream.
Yeah, no, before I said we don't plan our live streams and that's true, but like 2 minutes before Taylor was like, "Yeah, it's probably going to be pretty short." We could go for another hour. We could hit 2 hours, I think. But
Yeah.
we're not going to cuz we simply mustn't. We shouldn't do that. But I think this is kind of just a good place to wrap. Like in addition to it's been an hour, our time is up. I think we've just kind of covered. Uh, we did a we did a whole course on if you want to move to Ghost. Here's how to do it. And I think wrapping up with Taylor's going to move to Ghost now is kind of the best
It kind
spot.
of feels appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to. I'm also really interested to see how far we can push Ghost. I've been learning about um, some of the more internals of Ghost, and one of the cool things about Ghost that we did talk about a little bit, but is that because Ghost is relatively simple and there's no plugins, moving from between Ghost installs is actually a matter of just a couple files and then moving your images over. Um, and it all exports cleanly and can import perfectly. I would love to add that to my installer, a one-click backup button, basically. That would be really cool. I'm also really interested in revisiting an idea that I think Tim had originally and Jim brought up last year, which was Ghost multi-site. And I actually have, I think, a new way that it could work that would be really interesting. It would be cool for, like, what if you've got a class and you want them all to be blogging, but from like a perspective of how they would write newsletters, and they wanted to use a newslettering focused tool.
See, now that's got me
Ghost could be
thinking
a cool
about
thing for that.
with the activity pub, because one of the things I was thinking about is, for Mastodon, someone runs a server and you sign up for the server. For Ghost, you're kind of running your own Ghost blog.
Yep, and it's its own little server from an activity perspective. It makes a lot
Yeah.
more sense for one person.
Yeah.
You could also have class networks that way. What would that look like? I don't know. It could be cool. This is all theorizing that I could get Ghost multi-site working. I don't actually know that. I can't find anyone on the internet who's even bothered. So
Coming to
it may
Reclaim
not be
TV
possible.
live in like 6 months, probably.
Yeah, so I don't
Maybe
know. It may
less.
not be possible, but I'm just saying I would like to really pedal the metal on Ghost and see what we can do with it in kind of weird ways too. Because we do that with WordPress, and we're going to continue doing that with WordPress, to be clear. But this is a new tool that I find really interesting, and I want to see what it could be good for in those ways.
Yeah. Well,
all right.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, everyone. This has been a great Flex course, and this has been a great way to wrap the Flex course. Unofficial dream session.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see everyone next time. Thank you all.